How are you guys doing? This is Katie, and today I will be walking you guys through tables, graphs, and charts. This is workshop 2, and we're going to begin by talking about pivot tables. So, what are pivot tables? A pivot table is basically an Excel table that is very customizable. You can play around with it, manipulate the data in all types of ways without having to use a bunch of complicated functions. And we're going to use that to answer this question. Make a report ranking the students based on their total test average. So we want to find the students' test averages, and then we want to rank these students from who got the highest score to who got the lowest. So we're going to select all of this data, go to Insert, and the very first option that you're going to see is Pivot Table. We're going to click on the top half, and here's what it gives us. So we have the table or range. This is basically the data we selected. If you didn't pre-select it, you can select it now. We can choose whether to make this on a new sheet, which is going to pop up down here, or in the existing worksheet. I'm going to choose to do it in the existing worksheet. So I'm going to have it pop up right here. And location. So what cell do we want to make this pivot table appear on? I'm going to choose the cell right below the report. Usually that is a safe bet. And now we have an empty table. Don't worry, this is fine. This is how it should look in the beginning because we haven't put anything on it. So now we have all of these fields on the side, and they are the different elements of this table. And we can choose whether or where we want them to appear. So we can grab the student name and drag it down to rows, and this is going to list all of our students. Even easier way to do this is just clicking things. So you can also just click on students, and Excel will automatically put it in rows. Now, Excel is smart enough to understand where these things go half the time, but if you need to customize it some type of way, you're always able to do that. And that is why pivot tables are so helpful. So let's start by putting all of our data in. And right off the bat, we know that we want to get the students' test average. So we honestly don't need the quizzes. And here we have the list of students and their test scores, but we don't have the average. What I want you guys to do to find the average, as far as a pivot table goes, could you use the formula? In theory, yes, but I want you guys to learn how to manipulate a pivot table. And the way to do this is by clicking inside of the table and then going to Pivot Table Analyze at the top. Out of all these fields here, for the sake of this workshop, you're going to be focusing on fields, items, and sets. So you're going to click that and go to Calculated Field. And now we get this calculation, right? So we can choose a name for it, for which I'm going to say test average, and then a formula. So what this is going to do is make a formula based on these variables of the table, and the result of that is going to appear as a new column. So since we want the average of the two tests, the way to find the average of two things is to add them up and then divide them, right? So we're going to open parentheses, double click on test 1, click on plus, double click on test 2, close the parenthesis, and then slash or divided by 2. So that's usually how it goes. Basic statistics, but to find the average value of something, you add up all of the values together and divide it by the number of values that you have. So we add the two test scores together and divide them by 2, hit OK, and it gives us a new column with the test average as the result. Now that we have the test average, we don't really need the scores of test 1 and test 2 because the only thing the report is asking for is the student's average score. And I'm not going to take points off if you still have the test scores individually, but when presenting data, guys, it's super important for it to be as clean and minimalist as possible because you don't want to show people more information than they need. That would just confuse them. So just having the test average here is ideal. That takes care of the first half of the question, which is finding the total test average. Now we have to rank the students based on that. So to do this, we're going to click on any of the numbers for the average test score, and we're going to right click. And from here, we're going to go to sort. The options it gives us by default are smallest to largest or largest to smallest. We're going to do largest to smallest. So now we have a ranking of the students based on their test scores from highest to lowest test scores. And that took literally 2 steps of work, finding the average and then doing a sort. Guys, another thing that would be nice for you to do during the exam would be to right click on this grand total here and go to pivot table options, then go to totals and filters, and then turn off show grand totals for rows and show grand totals for columns. It's just cleaner data that way. Next, we're being asked to make a report of the top 5 companies from this list based on their profit. So we have the company ID, the company name, their revenue, and their cost. So we're going to start by selecting this entire table, and we're going to go to insert. Next, we're going to say pivot table. From here, we have our data selected. We're going to put it in the existing worksheet, and the location is going to be right underneath the request. And now we have our empty pivot table. Now we can click on all these things. We don't necessarily need the ID for this, so I'm going to remove that. We have the revenue and we have the cost of each company. Again, I'm going to start by removing the grand totals because we don't need the totals for those. And before we can rank companies based on their profit, we have to find what their profit is. So let's go back to pivot table analyze, fields, items, and sets. And we're going to make a calculated field. We're going to call this profit. And for the formula, we can delete the 0 here. And we can say double click revenue, click on minus, double click cost. And we're going to say okay. Now we have the profit of each company. And the reason for this, obviously, is because profit is revenue minus cost. So now we have our profit. We can remove revenue and we can remove costs from the pivot table. If we ever need them again, we can bring them back. However, for now, we don't. And we need to find the top 5 companies. And to pull the top 5 companies based on profit, we're going to right click anywhere inside the table on the company names. And we're going to go to filter. And we do this because there is a filter specifically called top 10, which will give you the highest any number of values. It's called top 10, but you can bring it down. You can make it 5 items based on profit, sorry. And then we say, okay. So now it narrows the list down to the 5 companies with the highest profit. Now, these companies are still all over the place. They're not sorted yet. I mean, they're not top to bottom. So for us to do that, we right click on the number. And once again, like last time, we are going to sort from largest to smallest. And now we have the top 5 companies from this list based on their profit. We didn't have to manually do any calculation. We just used the formula. It did it by itself. We filtered to bring out the top 5 without having to look through them. And we were able to rank them based on that as well. And it only took 1 minute. Next, we have this list of managers here who are definitely not our VPs and president. And we're going to make a report of their activity for each month. Now, first of all, as you guys can see, there is an empty column in this table. And that is the first thing we want to address. Because how are we going to use a table for data if that table is missing data? So because we want to pull the month to make a monthly report, we're going to have to take that from the date. Now, throw back to workshop 1 to pull the month. What we do is we use the text formula, open parenthesis, and we have 2 parts to it. So the first part of the formula is where we want to pull the month from. What is the cell that we're working with? Well, we want to pull it from this date right here. And then we're going to say comma. And the way we want to format it, as you guys may remember, if we say M in quotation marks, is going to give us the month number. MM is going to give us the month in double digits. 3 M's is going to give us a shortened version of the month. But we want the monthly report. I think it would look nicest with the full month spelled out. So we're going to do that. And now we have the month, which is directly pulled from the date next to it. Now we can start typing this formula again, but we're not going to do that because Excel has super easy ways of doing things on a large scale. So for example, if we click on the cell and we look to the bottom right of the cell, there's a little green dot. And if we hover over it with our mouse is going to become a black plus sign. We could grab that little green dot and drag it down. And as we do this, it autofills the rest of the cells with the same formula. And this formula takes the month from here. The formula for B3 will take the month from C3. The formula for B4 will take the month from C4, and so on. And the best part is we don't even have to drag the whole formula across all this table. What we could honestly do, we could click on the first cell, find the same green dot at the bottom right corner of the cell, hover over it until our cursor becomes a little black plus sign, and then double click it. And that autofills all the way to the end of the table with the formula accurately. So that is the easiest way to give us the data we need, and now we can work with it. Now we're being asked to make a monthly report of the activity of each manager. Now we can see that our managers here had a bunch of meetings, a bunch of phone calls, a meeting with Ed and whatnot. What we want is to see how many meetings and or phone calls, how many times they were scheduled each month. Now this is a much bigger table than the other two. So we're going to start by clicking on the first cell. And again, we can drag across the whole thing if you want to, but I don't want to do that. So I'm going to show you guys some tricks. Again, if we click on the first cell of this table and we hold shift, and then we start hitting the arrow keys on our keyboard, it takes the cells one by one. And this allows us to move our selection very smoothly through using the keyboard. If we want an even easier time selecting this entire table, we're going to hit Control. And while holding Control, we're then going to hit Shift. And while holding Control and Shift, we're going to hit on any arrow key. So if we click on the right arrow key, it automatically selects all the way up to the end of the table. And if we click on the down arrow key, it selects all the way down. So in 2 clicks and half a second, we have selected this entire table. Now we're going to go back up. We're going to say Insert Pivot Table. We have our entire selection here. We're going to do this in the existing worksheet, and the location is going to be right underneath the request. And now we have an empty pivot table. So if we select all these things, first of all, we don't need a date because that's too specific. There's so many dates on this. And we're being asked to make a monthly report of each manager, not necessarily a daily report. So we don't need the dates. We don't necessarily need to know who they're meeting with for the sake of this workshop. I mean, we just want to know the activity of the managers. And we can't have everything in rows either. So this is where it's important to know how to drag things around and where to put them. So this isn't something you have to memorize necessarily. You just have to play around with it. So let's take month and drag that to columns. So now we have January, July, August, September, October, November, December. And then let's take the description, which is the activity that they did, and put it in values. And now we have something much, much better. Now, how does it pop up like this? Well, we have the managers as the rows, which is pretty self-explanatory. We have the months as the columns. But the thing is, this report only takes place over these few months. And why does description show up as a number instead of meeting or phone call? Well, that is because we put it in values. And so Excel automatically gives us a count of description. And we could change this stuff. We could say sum of description or average. But in our situation, we just want to know how many times they were scheduled or booked. So the count of the times that they were booked is actually what we need. So we can just keep this the way it is. So for example, Andrew was booked 3 times during January. And Sunny was booked once during August. And now it's very easy for us to understand what each manager was doing over time. And for this one, the grand totals are not as bad because knowing how many times Arjun was booked total over the span of these few months, or knowing how many times all of our managers were booked during the span of January, it might be helpful. So I'm not going to remove that. It's pretty intuitive. It's about, do you see this information being relevant to the data you're displaying? So for manager activity, yes. But for something like ranking the companies based on profit, we don't need to know what their profit combined is, you know? Anyways, this is basically it for now as far as pivot tables. Next, let's go to weather graphs. And first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to show you guys something. So this information here is pulled from this table right here. And we do that in a couple of different ways. So we use VLOOKUP, we use if, which is a nested if function. So if within an if within an if. And then we use ifs, which is a different application of the if function. Now, you guys don't need to know this stuff yet, but these are the things that are going to appear in the next 2 to 3 workshops. So I'm giving you guys a teaser for what's going to be next. I'm going to select these in yellow just in case you guys want to look at them. Absolutely don't have to yet. That being said, there's 2 things I want you guys to learn from this section, and both of them are going to be on the test. One of them is going to be conditional formatting, and the other is how to make graphs. So let's start with graphs. We're being asked to make a line graph of temperature over time. Now, the way to do this, we go to Insert. And out of everything on this table, what do we need to display this information? So we have the month, which is time, and then the average temperature. So we have the month, which is the time, and the temperature. So we're going to select both of these. And from here, we're going to go to recommended charts. This is by far the easiest way to do this. Now we have a bunch of recommended charts here, but for the sake of your guys' practice, I'm going to ask you to go to all charts at the top. And this makes it super easy for us to select exactly the type of chart we need. So it's asking for a line graph of temperature over time. Now, out of all these options here, we can see that one of the first ones is line. And from there, we can just double click on this graph and it gives us exactly what we were looking for. It puts this information in the format of a line graph. So this was the average temperature spanning from about 30 to 100. And this is how high it was for each month. And here we have, for example, July, it went all the way up to 80, which if you look at the table, it checks out. Now, I know that during the workshop, a lot of our Mac users were having trouble with the recommended charts section. So what you guys can also do is select the data and then look at the charts that are given by default. I'm going to try to limit the exam to charts that you can use by default, just for the sake of the Mac users, because it's kind of difficult to use the recommended charts when they're not there. So we have all of these options here for a line graph. You can choose whichever one you like. I'm going to choose this one. And we can have that pop up as well. Same exact way. Next, we're going to make a column graph of temperature over time and include the data labels in the center of those bars. So if you're hearing this for the first time, you might be like, what does that mean? Well, let's start with what we know, right? Make a column graph of temperature over time. So let's go to Insert. Once again, we're going to select the temperature and the time, which is the month. And from here, we're going to go to recommended charts. We're going to then go to all charts, and we have the option for a column chart. Now, we can choose either one of these, whichever one looks best to you. I'm going to choose the first one. And now we have the same information. It's the same exact curve, but now instead of a line, it's displayed in columns, and each month has its own respective column. Now, to include data labels, we're going to click on this plus sign right here. And this is going to be very important for this second workshop. Whenever there's a second sentence after the first make a graph request, you're probably going to go to this plus sign. If you're on Mac, you're probably going to find this somewhere at the top of your bar towards the left. Anyways, it says include data labels at the center of your bars. So if you look at all the options here, we have data labels, right? We can select that. And if we click on the arrow, we can choose where they go. And we're going to say center. So basically, this is going to give us the exact number of the temperature, and we want to show it right in the middle of the bar. Now, in the exam, if the question specifies that you need to include data labels, you need to include them. And if it says where, then you would include them there. But also, it's just the plus sign, whichever one it's asking for. And then click on the arrow, and you go from there. Again, if you're on Mac, it might be somewhere up here. And the next thing I want you guys to learn for the weather graphs is conditional formatting. This is something that is super, super, super easy, but I've seen people lose points in the exam because of this in the past. It's not something that's just there to look nice. It's genuinely very relevant to data analysis and the way that you present your data. And again, it will be on the test. So we're going to show you how to do it right now. Now, what is conditional formatting? We basically give Excel conditions in which it changes the way that the cell looks. So let's say for cold weather, we want that to be blue. No matter what number it is, as long as it's from 0 to 44 degrees, we want that cell to appear blue. For sweater weather, which is 45 all the way up to 59 degrees, we want it to be more yellow. So we want the number here to appear yellow for everything that's between those numbers. And for nothing needed, the warm weather, we want it to be red. So how can we do this easily? Well, we're going to select all of these numbers, or you can select the whole column. And on the home option, you're going to see toward the right conditional formatting. We're going to go where it says highlight cell rules, and we have a bunch of options. So we can start from wherever we want. Let's say we start with 60. So we're going to say greater than. We're going to change the number to 59. So we want anything above 59, so 60 and above. And we're going to say light red fill with dark red text. That is fine. And so every number above 60 on this column is now highlighted in red. Next, we could do sweater weather. So we're going to go to conditional formatting again. We don't have to unselect anything. If you accidentally unselect it, just select it again. Highlight cell rules, and we're going to say between. So we're going to say between 45 and 59. And we're going to look at the color we want to give it. So yellow fill with dark yellow text. I think that's okay, but you can also go to custom format if you like. And where it says at the top fill, you can just choose whatever color you want. I'm going to choose this one. And now we're going to go back to conditional formatting, and we're going to say less than. And for any weather that is less than 45 degrees, we want it to be blue. We don't have blue here as an option, so we're going to go to custom format at the end. If this is your first time doing it, you will appear where it says font. Just go to where it says fill and click on any of the blue colors. And this stays interactive. So if we were to change this 42 to like a 56, it becomes yellow. Everything else changes here. This is not because of that. This is because of these formulas up here. Again, you don't need to worry about those yet, but I just wanted to show you guys. And lastly, we're going to make some more graphs just to make sure that you guys are comfortable doing this. So we have these chocolate bar brands and how many people on each of these countries consider it their favorite. Here we have an average value, which is not filled, and whatever unique ingredients these chocolate bars use. So let's start by filling the information we don't have. We have the average. It's the average of people who prefer this chocolate bar per country. So in the UK, 8 people consider Twix their favorite. In France, that's 21. In the US, it's 40. In Germany, it's 11. So how can we find the average of those values? Well, Excel has a formula exactly for that. So we're going to double click on the cell, hit equal sign, and type average, open parenthesis. And the only thing it asks us for is every number that is going to be considered. So let's say cell B3, comma, cell C3, comma, cell D3, comma, and then so I'm going to use my arrows for this one, E3. Close the parenthesis. Enter, and we get the number 20. Now, I really want you guys to understand there's no set in stone way to select these cells. So we can say equal sign, average, open parenthesis. We can also just use our mouse for this. So we can click on cell B3, which is the first value, and drag it all the way across. These numbers are in order. Instead of doing commas, Excel will just use a colon and say B3 all the way through E3. So all of the cells between these two are going to be considered while taking the average value. We can hit enter, and again, we get average. Or you can use the method I taught you guys today and navigate out with the arrow keys. If you're on Mac, this might be a little difficult for you. I would recommend just using a mouse if you want an easier time, but hold shift and then just go through all of them, all the way up to Germany. Don't forget Germany, and hit enter. So now you guys can drag this down, or you can double click it and it's going to autofill for the rest of them. So here we have the average of these cells. Here we have the average of Kit Kats, and so on. Now, it's asking us create a column chart with all of the countries and all of the chocolate bars. Include axis titles. 2 parts of this question. So the first part is create a column chart with all of the countries and all of the chocolate bars. Since that's all it's asking for, that's all we need to put in there. So we select the items and the countries. We're going to go to insert, recommended charts, all charts, column, and double click on either one of these. Again, if you're on Mac and you cannot do this for some reason, just go to where it says insert column or bar chart and choose one of them. And here it gives us the different chocolate brands, a color corresponding to each country, and the number of people in that country that consider it their favorite. We can put that here and include axis titles. So what does that mean? Well, you guys know when you make graphs, there's a Y value and an X value. So we want to say here, for example, favorites, or we want to say here, chocolate brand. That's basically what an axis title is. So again, we're going to click on this plus sign. If you're on Mac, what you're looking for is probably toward the top left. And what we have is axis titles. So we're going to select that. And now we get these two boxes in which we can type whatever we need to. For the values, we could say favorites. For the horizontal one, we could say chocolate brands. We can move that toward the middle so it looks better. And that's basically what it's asking us. Now, you don't have to over-explain yourself with these unless the question asks you to. So if the question says include axis titles, yes, put something there and make sure it's accurate. But the way you word it is up to you. Next, we're being asked to make a combo chart with the average as a line graph and the rest as columns. Much more complicated. However, take it one step at a time. So it says create a combo chart, right? And it's saying the average as a line graph, so we know we want to include the average, and everything else as a column. So let's select the items, the countries, and the average. We're going to go to insert, and we're going to say recommended charts. Again, once again, all charts, and the very last option says combo. This is what a combo chart is. So basically, some things are shown as columns, other things are shown as lines. So we want the countries to be columns, but the overall average value, we want it to be a line that goes through it. So by default, Excel is telling us that UK, France, and the US are columns, and it gives us two lines, one of which is Germany. We don't want that. We want to click on it and turn this into a column. The average is the only thing we want to see as a line. And we're going to take that down here. Now, again, in data analysis, and I want to teach you guys these skills, but I also want you to be able to apply them to your internships and jobs. Something important to understand for real world practice is color, right? So we have a blue column and a blue line. They don't look great together. It's the same color twice. So what we can do here is we can select on the, we can click on the line, and where it says line, and here where we see the blue color, we can change that to something else. For the sake of this workshop alone, green is fine. It doesn't have to look the best. Just try not to use the same color for two things that are right next to each other, you know? But you can also click on the column, and you can go to where it says fill, and you're not changing the color of the border because it's kind of pointless. And you can make this black, for example. Again, this is to show you guys that you can do this, but I'm going to keep this as blue. And one other thing that's worth knowing, if you click on this pen, which says chart styles, you can click on color, and it gives you pre-selected color schemes, which I am going to choose not to use, but it's good for you to know. Next, we're going to create a column chart with all the chocolate bars for the UK and for Germany. So what it's asking us is the favorite chocolate bars, the UK, and Germany. We don't want anything else. So how could we do this? Now, the easiest way to do this is to select the first column you want to use, which is items, then hold down Control, then select the UK column. While still holding down Control without letting go of the button, select Germany and drag that down. And we're going to go to Insert, Recommended Charts. Again, you can go to All Charts. Or if you're on Mac and you're having trouble with that, you can just click on the column chart, which is given to you by default, and say Clustered Column. Bring that down here, and here you have a graph of the favorite chocolate bars in the UK and Germany alone, without any data we don't need. This is by selecting everything, putting it in a column chart, and filtering. So the first button is chart elements, the second one is customizing it, and the third one is filters. You can choose what to display and what not to, which makes it a little more dynamic. So you can choose not to display France and the USA and hit apply. And that's only going to show the UK and Germany if you choose to do it this way. And lastly, we're going to create a pie chart of all the favorite chocolate bars in the USA. So we're going to select the item, which is the chocolate bars, hold down Control, then select the USA column. and then go to insert. We can go to recommended charts, all charts, pie. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just go to the pie chart, which is given to you by Excel, and click on the first one. And now you have a pie chart. It shows you the distribution of how many people like each chocolate bar in the USA. Now that's all you need for the sake of the question, because it doesn't ask you to get specific. But if you want to get more specific, again, you can go to data labels, put them in the center. It doesn't look the best this way. So if we say outside end, much better, much better. A lot of this comes down to your own judgment. However, for the sake of the exam, if the question doesn't ask you to specify, you don't have to specify. And that concludes workshop 2, guys. Super, super important to understand. As far as workshop 2 goes, if you're reviewing for the exam, there is no answer key. You cannot look at the formulas and try to memorize them. You have to be able to navigate and create these pivot tables and these graphs on the spot. So this is not difficult stuff, but the only way to remember how to do it is to practice it. So do these a couple of times until you're confident that you can do them without a tutorial, because the muscle memory is what's going to help you during the exam, especially for workshop 2. Also, aside from pivot tables and graphs, a couple key features for you guys to remember. When making pivot tables, you're going to be playing around with fields, items, and sets, calculated fields, and you're going to put whatever formula is appropriate. And while working with graphs, keep in mind, the plus sign shows you the chart elements. Usually the second sentence in your request, if there is one, is going to involve this. For Mac users, again, it's at the very top, maybe toward the left. The pen is for the style, and the filter is for you to choose what you want to display. So those are the main tools you're going to be using for this workshop. Keep that in mind going into the exam. And if you guys have any questions, again, feel free to reach out, baseofrutgers@gmail.com. Or if you see me in campus, just ask me. And I wish you guys the best of luck with your midterms, projects, and learning the second workshop.